Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Welcome to our new series of webinars. So it's Insights, Business Insights. My name is Eva Wöhner. I'm the head of consumer for Spengler Fox. For those who are not familiar with our company, we are a global retained executive search firm, and we cover the major and emerging markets. We have a strong focus on board level work for small and medium-sized companies. So we are not only doing executive search, we also deal with interim management, outsourcing, and leadership advisory. Hence, we are able to offer the full suite of human capital solutions to our clients around the world. Before I introduce our speaker for today, Paurav Shukla, I would like to point out to a few things, housekeeping things. So first of all, we are recording our today's call. All the participants have been muted and they will remain muted throughout the presentation. There will be time for question and answers at the end of the session, but there will also be some kind of interactive Q&A in between. There is a dialog box at the bottom of your screen, so please use it when you have questions and comments. Also, what we will do after the session today, we will send out the recording and any handouts or resources that have been mentioned in the call. But now let's start the seminar. And first of all, I would like to thank very much Professor Paurav Shukla from Southampton Business School, who is our today's panelist. I'd like to tell you the following about Paurav. So he's Professor of Marketing and the head of Digital and Data-Driven Marketing Department at the Southampton Business School in the UK. He has done research highlighting the hidden meanings embedded within consumption practices across cultures and offers novel insights, and he will share them with us today. Paurav's career began in the industry, and he continues to work with academic institutions and corporate organizations in the capacity of a visiting professor. He also, from time to time, comes to Frankfurt Business School. He is also an advisor, and he's part of the board of directors of Southampton Business School. He has also published many articles in top-tier academic journals, and popular accounts of his work have appeared on the BBC, the Sunday Times, the Guardian, and many other international outlets. He has consulted for global consumer brand firms such as Unilever, JSK, the Zurich Insurance Group, and also leading as well as budding for digital companies, international luxury and fashion brands, large financial and insurance firms, among others. So he's a very experienced person who, in my view, well combines academia with the business world. So very warm welcome for Paurav. I'd also like to mention the today's talk title, which is Sustainable Consumption Amongst Millennials. The two questions, what's different and what's new? So Paurav, the floor is yours. Please go ahead, and very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Eva. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues, and wherever you are joining us from. Thank you again, Eva and Spengler Fox, for giving me this opportunity to share some of our research findings in today's seminar. I'll take about 20 to 25 minutes in delivering this talk about sustainable consumption among millennials. What I would also like participants who are joining us is to keep an eye on your keyboard, and sometimes I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I would love to have answers from you. So this would be very simple things, but please join in. I would want it to be as interactive a seminar as possible. So without further ado, let me tell you some of the things that we are going to talk about today. When we are thinking about sustainable consumption among millennials, the first thing that has come to my mind And I have been talking to a lot of people about consumption for several decades now. And that is that these millennials are different. They are different and they are different from us. But then when we say who is us is also very tricky. So in today's seminar, I want to answer three questions. The first question I want to ask is, are millennials really different? If they are different, how different they are? Secondly, what kind of techniques and tools can we use to engage with this audience? And the third question is, in a way, literally a take home for all of us who are managers in here or academics in here or, budding managers that have joined us today. And I want to give you something to take home. So these are the three objectives I have in mind. And with that in mind, also, I have provided some links in terms of my social media accounts. So if you wish to connect with me later on, please just type in Paurav Shukla, and I'm pretty sure you will find a way to connect with me. So without further ado, let me show you something. And I hope you can see the screen. And Eva, if I may ask you a question, imagine there is a white elephant in this room right now. So in this virtual room where we are sitting with global audiences, and the answer is 63%. What is the question? What do you think is the question here?
So, Paurav, definitely it will be linked to the topic of today, linked to millennials, and definitely it will refer to a percentage of them and linked to the sustainability. So I guess you might want to tell us that 63% of the millennials are keeping an eye on sustainability. At least this is what I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. So correct me if I'm wrong.
So it could be that way. What are other people who are joining us thinking? What do people think? Let's have a quick go at it. What do you think? If 63% is the answer, what is the question here? Eva, you're almost there, but if there are other views on this, you can drop your notes in the chat box. What would be the question here? We could wait for 10, 15 seconds for people to write. If not, I will tell you an answer in a moment, but I would love to hear some views. It is a white elephant in the room. So Dr. Claudia Kuller says that, how many people can see a white elephant? Oh, that's a very good thing. Actually, most of the time, most people, Claudia, would see the white elephant, but won't call it, isn't it? In the boardroom when we are sitting, many a times we see those things and we don't talk about it. How interesting. Rubel says a number of millennials in the total crowd, and Shweta says that how many millennials are positive about sustainable consumption. That's very, very interesting things you're talking about. This was our first study. This was an eye opener to me. That's where, in a way, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you about 5-6 different studies that we have conducted around this in my lab and, with some of my co-authors. The first thing I would like to talk about is this 63% is about the UK population level. We just sent them one question. Do you believe in sustainable consumption, and do you do sustainable consumption of any sort? And our answer came out to be that 63% of people were either believing or engaging in sustainable consumption. Now, this is a striking figure when you think about it. In a way, as a researcher, it struck me that all these talks going on, David Attenborough's amazing documentaries have come to the fore. There are so many other things happening. And what we have found is that 63% of people are still just convinced, but there is 1/3, there is 37% of people who are actually not engaging in this consumption. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, so should companies do sustainable consumption? That debate is long done. We already know that companies that engage in sustainable consumption type of practices, they generally fare better. So I don't want to talk about it. I want to talk about from a consumer side. What are consumers thinking? And this is something really big in the room, which we are not talking about. In a way, like what Claudia said earlier in terms of, how many people can see a white elephant. And this is the white elephant in the room. that 2/3 of the people are ready to engage, but 1/3 are not, which means that the 2/3 will have to put extra effort on behalf of the 1/3 who are not going to behave that way to do something. This is quite critical in that sense. And so let us play a little game to start with. So imagine if I asked you a question like this, forget about millennials or non-millennials. This was a survey we did of general population in the UK, about 400 people. And we asked a question: would you consciously buy from companies that partner with charities or not profits that are making a positive impact on people's lives? What do you think? How many people would have agreed with us? How many percentage of consumers? So you just have to type in literally two numbers in a way from 0 to 100 or 0 to 99%. What do you think? Please go ahead. Give me some numbers. 5% Vijay says, 40% says Hongfei, Nagendra says 55. That's fantastic. And Chinmoy says 45, more than 60 says Rubel, Swati says 25%. Sweta, possibly, you're saying only 10%. I'll come to the India example in a moment. And Mohina says 55. So you're seeing a variation from 5 to 60%. In a way, generally the wisdom of the crowd works when you average it out. And we found that general population, this we are talking about, that about 43% of people would say that they would actually. But if I change the question a little bit, what happens now? And this was something what we do in my lab. So we switch on, switch off triggers in people's minds. So you can see the question now, what you are seeing. And that question is almost the same, but with a little difference. We are saying that, would you buy from companies that say that they prefer to give something back to the society? Do you think the percentage would change among general population if you say something like this? So Vijay has moved from 5 to 60. Others are saying yes. Eva is also saying yes. Hongfei is saying even 85%. So now, percentages are moving up. I like that. No, Swati say. So you can see this confusion that we have. And what we find is that about 22%, it literally reduces by half. So the general population suddenly seem to say that when you say that you're engaged with charity, so this is your first take home, that if you're targeting the consumers from general population, then you wouldn't say possibly charities and not-for-profits is a better way rather than saying giving something back to the society. But what about millennials? So we asked questions particularly to the millennials. Do you think it would change for the millennials? What are your views? Do you think millennials would say that they would want to buy from companies that consciously partner with charities and not-for-profits? Okay, Rubel says that they are more sensitive. Mohina says they are more sensitive. Quite interesting. Ankur is putting it a little higher than the normal consumers. That's quite interesting. 50 says Eva. So let me give you a little answer on that. That's 34%. This is very unusual because we hear that millennials are, more conscious and more driven by making positive impacts on people's life. But when you connect with charities, it's not their game. What we also asked was this other question to the millennials saying, would you prefer to buy from companies that give something back to the society? And the numbers move a little further up. So what I'm trying to show you here is a very interesting pattern about millennials. Millennials tend to engage with communication or rhetoric or any sort of message that they would like to engage with companies that would give something back to the society. While in the general population, as in terms of the other cohorts, what I call people like me, older cohorts, they seem to be liking messages wherein you say, I have engaged with this charity and I've given something to this charity. So this is quite a task in its own way, as we are seeing. So then Sharifa has put in a very interesting point around, do they buy things? So I'm coming to that in a moment, Sharifa. But what it tells us is this, that the consumers do care. So people do care about sustainability, but it does not mean that they are naturally altruistic. They they are always willing to, they are not always willing to make sacrifices in the name of the cause. So if you just as a manager think that you are going to be doing some sort of charitable event or some sort of philanthropy or something, that doesn't mean consumers are going to turn in. They are not overly altruistic in our nature. This is our socio-biological response. So this is evolutionary biology talking. And in that sense, consumers look to companies with the expectation that they will make the effort to, help out with good cause. So we like companies to help out, but that does not mean that we will do everything what companies say, or we will not believe also. So these are some of the things to keep in mind. Now, what Sharifa just mentioned, that question. So I'm coming to that question, which is quite interesting. So for example, we asked a question saying, what percentage of consumers agree that it is very important that companies should act morally or ethically? So if you're a manager and your company does not act morally, what happens? So when we asked this question, 66% of consumers said, yes, companies should act morally or ethically. That's a very good thing. Now, I am going to ask you all who are joining us in this call, and please participate. This is the question which was quite interesting for me. What the question was not about acting morally or ethically. It was about, would you boycott companies that behave unethically? What do you think? How many people would say, that consumers would boycott companies that behave unethically? Okay, Eva says 33. So now I'm getting fantastic numbers, 12% to 30% to 60% and 80%, even 65%, 50%. And, in a way, in some ways, we thought about it and people are saying yes. In a way, this is what your millennials are telling you, that, companies should act morally and ethically, but millennials are this crowd cohort who are saying, that they will boycott companies also. So they have this, what we call the teen spirit, the old song, feels like teen spirit. And that is what that spirit these people have, that they have this tendency that they will be very vocal about it. And they will say that we are going to make a change. We are going to make a difference. Then we asked a very subtle question. So you can see now the lettering of this question, which is coming up. And here the question was what Sharifa earlier asked, but if the company acts ethically and engages in ethical processes, how many millennials are ready to pay extra for that? What do you think now? Okay, I'm seeing now 0% from JJ, and Asma is saying 80% and very few, or 10%. I love these numbers. I can see you are already getting into it. And what we are seeing is that about 1/3 of people, about 31%, are really saying that they are ready to pay extra for it. So let's understand this. The millennials are saying that companies should act morally or ethically. Millennials are also saying that we will boycott you if you don't act that way. But when it comes to paying extra, no way, or rather very small percentage. And so we asked, because this is an Instagram generation, right? This is the generation which lives on social media. So we asked the final question, which was around social media. And we said, so when they buy these items, how many will feel pride in their socially responsible action? What do you think? What percentage would take pride if they buy these products? So out of this 31%, absolutely, Rubel, you've really hit that, and fantastic numbers are coming through. I can see this 90 and 80 and 70% and all that. And when you think about these numbers, that is what we are seeing, almost 70% on them. So if they buy something, they are going to show off. This is a conspicuous generation. they will, show their bags, or they will show their socially responsible credentials as much as possible. And these are some of the very interesting insights that we are capturing in my lab in regards to sustainable consumption. So this is what consumers expect from you as companies. Very, very powerful things that are happening, and subtle things that are happening in here. So with that in mind, I want to also share with you. So I've given you first part of the idea, and today we have amongst us, amongst us, one of my co-authors, also Hongfei Liu, who's leading this project. So I just want to show you some of the things that we are doing, and Hongfei is leading the charge in here. Professor Singh has put in a very interesting idea in terms of, these are self-reported intentions. They may not predict behaviors. I think that again is a debate that has been going on, Jaiwant, in the domain of social psychology for last 50, 60 years. But we have seen through theories, there are a number of theories of reasoned action and theories of consumer behavior. And we have seen that, when we look into reported intention, self-reported intention and behavior, there seems to be a very, very strong link. Again, still there remains a big attitude behavior gap when it comes to sustainable consumption. And I completely agree with you on that point, that, that attitude behavior gap, we still need to think. But that's where we are going now in terms of, doing a little more further studies into it. So coming to this study, one of the things we realized, where Hongfei and Chanaka at Surrey, we were talking about this whole idea, this question that when you think about materialism, across the world, materialism is increasing. In a way, if you look at your Instagram feed, the first thing you find is that almost every second or third post is about a consumption object. And so consumption objects are becoming part of our inherent identity. And so materialism is increasing around the world. There are a few countries where materialism is decreasing, but across the world, overall, materialism is on the rise. And so how do you make materialistic consumers buy ethical goods? This is a big question that Hongfei and is leading on, and I think it's the most fascinating question. And so we asked the question, and we thought, what if so we ran some experiments around this. And the first experiment, we saw that, materialistic consumers will not buy ethical goods. We know that that's a negative relationship, which is fine. But then we asked the question, then we ran a scenario asking, if we boost a person's self-identity and we tell them that you are ethical by yourself, you are by nature an ethical person, then what? Will it change their behavior? And what we saw was unbelievable. We were surprised in some ways. When we looked at it, what we found was that, this relationship between materialism and ethical identity was, funnily enough, that you could make highly materialistic people buy more ethical goods if you trigger their ethical self-identity. What do I mean by ethical self-identity? Is that you give them the pride in their notion of their own self, that you are by nature an ethical consumer. And that is a good thing. However, we also, remember what I said earlier, we switch on and switch off different triggers. So one of the other triggers we used in there was ethical obligation. And this ethical obligation is a point wherein what we try to do is say to people that you should behave this way, you should behave ethically, so it is good for the society. Remember, there are lots many companies who are advertising like that. They are saying that you should buy our product because we are doing good to the society. And the thing was very surprising. The relationship turned negative. This is something what you need to think about. So when you tell your consumers, remember, smoking is a fantastic example of a social behavioral change project. When companies started saying that smoking is injurious to your health and they started putting on those labels, funnily enough, in all markets, it was shown that smoking, actually the consumption of tobacco increased. And so when people push our obligation button, we tend to go the other way. rather than going into the right way. And so this is something what we are finding, and it is really, really fascinating. I could tell you so much more about it, but please talk to Hongfei or me later on, and we can share some more responses onto this. Now, I must mention this also, that here the context is very much retail, and retail brands. That's what we are looking into, and I can tell you more about it in the Q&A. But just mentioning this, and this was particularly focused also on luxury brands also. So that's where this behavior has become even more pronounced. And the final question we had asked in this study was that should brands invest in ethical certification? So should you invest in fair trade, or should you invest in those cocoa collaboration, or should you invest in positive butterfly mark, and so positive luxury mark and all that stuff? And what we find is that highly materialistic consumers actually like those things. And if you are engaged in ethical certification, which is relevant to your industry, so if you're a coffee manufacturer and you are if you are invested into fair trade, they like it more. So this is a second take home for many managers who have joined us today in this call. The final thing I want to come up, and I would summarize this overall as to what we are finding with regard to the millennials, is these are the take homes you could possibly take forward. The idea is changing in millennials is the narrative has to change from me to we. So you will have to do the work for the millennials. They like you to do their work and then take pride in whatever they've bought from you. Remember that's the whole point. So they are doing from me to we, which is you will have to demonstrate ethical behavior on their behalf. So if you look at Tom's shoe, for example, if you buy a Tom's shoe, then they will share another shoe of that kind with a child in Africa. So by buying a Tom's shoe, a millennial is telling others, I've already donated a shoe to African children, and that way they are taking pride. You also have to show a very clear purpose focus. Purpose has become a big debate right now. Organizational purpose and brand purpose and so on and so forth have become big debates. In a way, if you look at examples like Caring, or companies like Nestle, particularly now what they are doing, I'm going to share with you an example in a moment, but they are showing clear and consistent commitment. Caring's CSR plan is absolutely worth reading. So if you go to Caring's website and you look into that, it owns brands like Gucci and so many big luxury brands, but the kind of CSR work they are doing is absolutely fascinating. And also, for example, Nestle, has realized that many of these millennials are going to become parents soon, and they are very, we always have been worried about our children. So we always kind of, think about our children very carefully, and whatever we provide them with, especially food, we want to be extra careful when it comes to children. So Nestle right now is experimenting this in France, wherein they have created a puree. So this puree is sold in Carrefour. The thing is that it has a barcode. Every puree pack has a barcode. When you scan the barcode, you can actually see on what date, at what time this puree was made, in what plant of Nestle, what happened and how it was packed with what processes, and then when it was delivered to the Carrefour warehouse through what kind of mechanism, and then from Carrefour warehouse to the store, when was the journey made and how it arrived at the store. You can see the whole journey using this blockchain barcode on a Nestle puree. And this is again showing you commitment to the purpose that we are using. Provenance is going to become a major, major thing in today's counterfeiting world. And I think millennials are going to do that. You have to be very careful. So one of my co-authors, Dina Khalifa at Cambridge, she is working on this whole idea of how brands should engage in activism. And we are seeing some very interesting examples. You just don't spend the money. With Jaivan Singh, who is here, he has developed a very interesting framework on crisis-focused CSR. So this is a purpose-driven CSR activities that are happening in the marketplace, and we can focus on them. And the idea is, you don't just spend the money, but you'll have to engage with the community. For example, Harry's uh, is a shaving company in the UK, and it engaged with the Pride, the gay and lesbian community in the UK in a very proactive manner. I'll give you a very interesting example because I see a few Indian names here. So this is an example of in McDonald's in India. In the last general election, which happened, India is world's largest democracy, as you know, and the last general election, when it happened in India, at that point in time, in Hyderabad, one of the major cities in India, McDonald's would. So if you go to McDonald's on general election day, they would ask you, "Have you voted?" And in India, when you vote, they put a little mark on your first finger here, just a little dot, and that black dot doesn't go away for next 15 days. So the thing is that ink tells you that you have voted and you can't vote again. So you can avoid, re-voting and all those kind of frauds and everything. And so the McDonald employee would ask you, have you voted? And if you show your finger with that mark, they would then give you a menu. If you had not voted, they would take away the menu and serve whatever they liked. And so the point was that if you don't vote in a democracy, you don't have a choice. Now, this is a very insightful example of activism without actually annoying people in different ways. But it is kind of, making people aware that it's such an important exercise in democracy when you vote. And the final thing I would just want to touch upon is the idea of minimalism. And when we are seeing this millennials, they are showing a number of different kinds of reflections, and minimalism is coming out to be that. And we have just published a paper with Aniruddha Pangarkar and Ray Taylor in Villanova and Greensboro. And you may want to look into that paper on minimalism and the typology that we have developed around that, because these consumers have tremendously different expectations, and they are building some very interesting things around that. So, companies are taking advantage of, also like Unilever is creating this Love Home and Planet Line and all that. So there are a number of things happening around here, but I hope these are some of the take homes you can take forward to your companies and to your colleagues, and possibly help engage millennials with your companies a little better. So I'm going to stop the presentation here, and we will have a good interactive chat session. So I will stop my screen share here, Eva, and we can get back onto our chat.
Okay, thank you so much, Paurav, for all these insights. What I would like us to do, I think there's still a couple of comments in the Q&A session. Can we probably move up a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And would you like to comment on what Chaiwant was saying here?
Sure. So
on the self-reported intentions?
Yeah. So, like I said, with the self-reported intentions, the theory seems to say now, and we have ample evidence that when people are reporting some intentions, they also seem to behave in these behaviors. So this is a very tricky question because, when we ask people that, would you like to buy sustainably? Most people say yes. But when we actually see consumption, we see completely different, reality when we look into the panel data. So you're very right in that sense. When it comes to sustainable consumption, we see two different perspectives. In a way, we want to give socially desirable answer when asked, but when we actually behave, we don't behave that way. However, what we are seeing is that attitude behavior gap slowly but steadily with regard to sustainable consumption is possibly now going away because our value systems are changing. And I think the narrative across domains. So once upon a time, we had tremendous skepticism around the world when the global warming and the climate change related debate started. Most people were skeptical. What are you talking about? But now, if you actually talk to people, you can hear from even young kids. Yesterday evening over dinner, I was talking to my kiddies and we were talking about it. And my 10-year-old child was able to say that, by me consuming more plastic, some shark in somewhere in Pacific is getting it into its body. And I thought, wow, that's a message really conveyed. So I think that would slowly percolate into the society. I'm not saying that it would happen immediately, or some catastrophic event will happen and it'll happen tomorrow. But no, I think there is still a way to go. But I believe that those behavior, attitude and behavior gap is slowly shrinking.
Amazing example you were just telling us about your 10-year-old. I wouldn't have raised this comment or questions when I was 10 years old, because we were different at the time. We are not aware of what impact our consumption has on the nature or on animals.
That's true.
There, right?
And what I would say,
picture.
one of the things I find is my own personal example. So yesterday, I was sitting and reflecting on the talk I was going to give, and I was thinking I should start with my own personal example, and then I decided no, but I can share that example here with you. Is I still remember when I was a child in India. So I grew up in India, and I had an aluminum made bag in which I carried all my stuff. So my lunch box, it was my school bag, right? And it was in which I carried my lunch box and my books and everything. We used it as a football at times. When we played cricket in India, that bag became stumps also. So the ball was hit onto it. Yeah. Now that bag was not mine, because that bag actually belonged to one of my cousins. And I went back to him and I asked, was it your bag? And he said, no, it was one of my other cousin's bag. And so the bag was in the family for 30 years. And, and I still used it without a problem. I had my own stickers on it and everything. It was my bag, obviously, so it had to have my stickers and everything. But it worked. It was extremely sustainable product, which lasted 3 generations and probably a little more, right? The thing is that we change about 2 bags every year for both of my kids. Right. So when I'm looking at that sustainability, some of the sustainabilities I have seen in my own life, I feel like, we have become less and less sustainable as we have become more and more materialistic. And I think more resources and the ease of getting the resources, I think, has made it so easy for us to even waste more. When there are resources are a little more crunched, we suddenly become more aware, and we suddenly become more, for example, I have seen a very interesting example of sustainability into house consumption. As this COVID pandemic struck, no doubt people, first of all, did panic buying, but at the same time, people became more aware about what they were consuming. So these constraints made us even more aware. And I think those are the kind of things. So there is a positivity to this crisis also, that it is making us more sustainable as a society, I think.
Great. There is another comment from Rubai about luxury brands, the balance to the extent of sustainability communication. So doesn't it look like greenwashing?
Rubal, you're absolutely right. A lot of companies, we still don't trust when they do these campaigns, because many of them are not really driven by purpose. One of the first thing I was asked when, I have been doing a lot of research in luxury domain. And one of the question I was asked in regards to luxury was, is luxury and sustainability not opposite ends? And I don't feel that way. I feel luxury and sustainability actually go very much hand in hand. So I'll give you a very simple example. You may go to Primark or H&M and buy a suit, a suit to wear, and that would cost you about, I don't know, 50 pounds or 100 pounds or 200 pounds, because that's their range, right? And you may go to Savile Row and you can get a suit made, tailor-made, and it would cost you about, I don't know, 1,000 pounds, in some cases up to 14,000 pounds, or in some case, if it was a Brioni suit, then it could cost you about 75,000 pounds. The thing is that when you buy a Savile Row suit, that suit's life itself is Savile Row life. The reason is that, say for example, if your grandson happened to still have that suit, and it would last, believe me, you can take that suit to Savile Row, as in the grandson can take the suit to Savile Row and say, can you get it fitted to my size? And they will do so if the sizing is largely the same. So they will make that fitting even after 70, 80 years. That has happened. That happens still in Savile Row. And if you look into luxury watch industry, again, you see that sustainability, that some of these watches last you not just a lifetime, they last you far longer than that. That's why Patek Philippe says, that you do not buy, you're just a caretaker for your Patek Philippe because you're buying it for the next generation. And that's a very powerful message that tells you that um, that these are in the DNA. Sustainability is in the DNA of the brand. The quality is in the DNA of the brand. But Nagendra has posted another question in addition to that, saying that, can they spot greenwashing or how they are going to address it? As consumers, we generally don't. We generally remain skeptical, and we play, we use that skepticism, and on the basis of that. But by answering this kind of question, like using this blockchain technology, using this new digital technology, we can actually go deeper into that engagement of finding provenance, like what Nestle is doing. A lot of luxury brands are now doing. They are actually embedding blockchain into their product, because there is a massive second-hand luxury market in the world, right? Of handbags, of necklaces, of jewelry of every kind, and so on and so forth. So you can find the provenance of when the product was made and who was the first owner and who was the second owner, and so on and so forth. In painting, in art industry also, again, this is happening. So sustainability is going to come in different forms with different companies, and I'm pretty sure companies are going to engage with it as they realize that more and more consumers are demanding it. So it is our demand that is going to make them more sustainable.
Mhm. Are
Shall
there
I
more
take?
questions from
Yeah,
the
shall I
audience?
take this
Yeah,
question
I think.
on? Jayvant has asked this question. Could it be that millennials have a different psychological processing mechanism? And this is something what we want to find, Jay. Absolutely, I would say that we really need to. Right now, not enough cohort studies have been done with regard to millennials and their psychological processing. And I think there would be something more we need to look into. We are still suggesting them as just a cohort, and we are not looking into their psychological processing. But I think more needs to be done in that area to build on to this stronger, sustainable consumer consumption narrative. And I think we can do so much more. We can do so much more in that area. So yes, absolutely. This is a domain ripe for picking from academic as well as practitioner research and for companies, and it would be very, very useful. It is said right now that we were looking at some data, and it is said that millennials are going to spend approximately 67 billion US dollars in US only in the coming 5 years, just on sustainable aspects. So this is a massive industry. We need to really engage with it, and we need to start doing something about it. I'm also looking at a question by Hong Fei. And Hong Fei has talked. Thank you, Hong Fei. And it's great to have you here. And instead of corporate social responsibility, you also need to think about consumer social responsibility. You're absolutely right. Consumer social responsibility is a great thing. The problem is that consumers, as I showed in the slides today, consumers don't like to be socially responsible in some ways. They want companies to be socially responsible on their behalf. So when Marks and Spencer does something good, I buy from Marks and Spencer and I say, hey, look, I did good. And that is something what is going on. But absolutely right that if we can push this consumer social responsibility, even companies will become more socially responsible too. And I think the responsibility for that lies at our end. And it is how much altruistic, how much we are thinking about our own consumption domains. Because the thing you have to remember, Hongfei, also is, um, let me give you an example um, of of a different kind of disparity, economic disparities. So I do go to Democratic Republic of Congo, once a year to teach some senior managers there on global strategy and marketing management. And um, Democratic Republic of Congo has the second lowest per capita income in the world. Now, when I'm thinking about a consumer there, does that consumer not want to have the same kind of facility as what you are or I am sitting in right now, having this Zoom and everything? Now, if they want to have those facilities as just similar to us, forget about, higher than us, just similar to us, what kind of consumption triggers it will require when so many millions of people are still not at that level? And so if we do not start this sustainable consumption process itself, and we continue to be materialistic more and more, the chances are we are going into a slippery slope that we cannot recover from. So you are absolutely right, but it is so powerful a thing that we will have to take this step. And it reminds me of a very interesting story of a rabbi. And Eva, if we have time, I may share that little 2-minute story. Do we have the time for that?
Yes, we still have 14 minutes. Please
okay.
Go ahead.
So this is a small,
nice.
Super. So this is a small story. Once upon a time, there was this rabbi and he was so very, very intelligent. And call him a priest. Let's not even call him a rabbi, just call him a priest. And he was a very intelligent person. And he was very, very, brilliant scholar. So he was 20 years old, and one of his colleagues asked him, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to change the world for better. And so he started he traveled all around the world and he tried to preach people and so on and so forth. He was a movement in himself. He became about 30 years old and he realized, oh my God, the world is a big place. I can't change the world. So let me try and change my country. So whatever country he was, he decided to put all his effort into that and started preaching people and started doing things and so on and so forth. Did so many initiatives saying, let's make our country better, because if our country becomes better, then you know what? The world will see us as an exemplar, and the world will become better tomorrow. He became 40 years old and he realized, oh my God, the country is too big to change. Let's try and change our city. So he decided, okay, let's change our city. And he tried and tried and tried. For next 10 years, he became 50 years old. And at that point in time, this is an old story. So at 50 years old, you are almost on your deathbed. So the rabbi is now on his deathbed. And another scholar comes to him and says, I want to change the world. What is your reflection on that? And the rabbi on his deathbed, or the priest on his deathbed, says that, I don't know, colleague. I wish I could have changed myself. And I think that is the starting point. Can we change ourselves? And if we can, then I think the world will. So I hope that in some sense, that story, I think, captures that whole point. Yeah, do we have any other questions? Let me just check on the Q&A.
Yes,
there are a few more.
From Claudia, she would like to learn more about the millennial sample. So can you explore a little bit more about that?
Sure. Claudia, so this was, millennial cohort in terms of how millennials have been identified as a cohort. And what we did was that we looked into the millennial, using the same definition. We created the millennial cohort. We asked, so for the population, our sample was about 600 people, UK residents only. Again, for the second study also, our population was predominantly UK residents. And we asked them about retail brands. And for that study, which I'm doing with Hongfei and Chanaka, that study also is very much grounded in United Kingdom. We also have China data. So we are actually going to compare some sort of cross-cultural consumption. But the definitional lens, our definitional lens is quite similar to what standard definitions of what are millennials is there. So from that perspective, the overall sample size across the 3 studies is about 1,600 people. That's how much we have asked, but obviously there is never a perfect research, so we have to see. But the thing I would like to mention, Claudia, which is a very interesting question you have posed, is that, in a way, can we generalize? Because that's where we are going. Can we generalize to the wider population? In some ways, yes. In some ways, I think no. It's a kind of a mixed bag answer. I'm really sorry to say this is a mixed bag answer, but the reason why that is because when you think about this 400 or 600 people we have asked, and we've tried to capture a representative sample, but at the same time, like what we mentioned in earlier questions, self-reporting could create kind of socially desirable bias. But at the same time, also, it would what we are trying to capture one industry view. We are not trying to capture. What we are trying to capture are fundamental values. And these fundamental values would not change for a person. A person, I doubt it very much that a person who is really engaged in green consumption, or what I call sustainable consumption in food, will suddenly buy some sort of very, very unhealthy or earth friendly product in another domain. So they will not buy a gas guzzler car and then they will buy organic food into it. Chances are if they are buying gas guzzlers, they are also going to buy big barbecue. And if they are going to buy big barbecue, they are going to have certain practices around it. But if it's a green consumer, they will buy certain green things also. So you will see that pattern in value systems. So what we are exploring are value systems. And in doing exploring those value systems, I think we are capturing um, more more answers that are very generalizable in domains.
Mhm. Then we have another question from Chimnoy. She's asking about how the companies can position or communicate their brand in order to ensure that it's sustainable consumption.
Mhm. Chimoy, this is a very, very interesting question in some sense, that how do you position, how do you communicate when everyone is trying to get onto this sustainability wagon? So every company is trying to become sustainable. But I think I would suggest you to, connect with some of the people in my department, including Professor Jai Singh, who is doing some amazing work around crisis-focused CSR. And I think that there is this key to identify, because the thing is, many companies are trying to do activities such as giving something to the charity. So they just do philanthropic activities and think, I have done my job. But there are companies that have actually pivoted their whole existence on sustainability. So they are asking fundamental question. For example, in my university right now, in University of Southampton, we are asking questions such as um, such as is this travel required? For traveling purposes. The reason is we are looking into our sustainable footprints. And so when companies become deeply conscious about it, they will be able to find these new positions. They will be able to pivot their businesses. For example, companies like Burberry, right? They realize that, they are a fantastic trench coat company, as you know, but they realize that, UK had a shortage of PPE equipments. So they use their technological expertise in making those codes into PPE codes itself, right? Or for that matter, if you look into LVMH, it owns so many perfume brands. And as the French government realized that they did not have enough hand washes and those hand sanitizers and all, they used their chemical line for making those perfumes into, suddenly they pivoted their business alignment. And so you see these wonderful examples of companies that are actually engaging in these sustainable businesses. So you're going to find various ways to connect with, position yourself in in those markets.
There's also another comment from Chimnoy regarding the tension between sustainability and product-related aspects. So I was asking, what should be highlighted more by the company?
I think there is nothing wrong in highlighting both. In a way, there is nothing wrong in highlighting sustainability and at the same time your product's strong, quality narrative. So, for example, There is absolutely nothing wrong in Patek Philippe saying that we are a very good quality brand. That's why you are just a caretaker, and your son or daughter is going to get that watch from you because it's just going to run that fine. So it's perfectly all right to use both of those positions. There's nothing. I don't think it is either or.
Mhm. Then Patrick is asking, so do you see difference between the millennials and the generation Z? So how do they perceive sustainable consumption?
Oh, that's a tough one, Patrick. In a way, as a researcher, I would say I don't know. I can't answer that right now because we haven't looked into that. But hopefully, in a way, in future, or possibly, as you say, you are a marketing student at Southampton Business School. So why not, look into that as part of your research project also? There may be something different in there, and we must explore that, because each cohort is coming to this very differently. In a way, I admire the strength of this new generation. I think the way how they are acting on the climate narrative is really, really powerful and very reflective. And I think they are a wonderful generation that will hopefully hold the baton of climate change in their hands.
Mhm. Then we have Sharifa. She's pointing out to the financial limitations or aspects. Yeah. So
I don't think
how would you
sustainability is
put it?
costly. I
Yeah.
think that is a narrative that is long, just highlighted by companies and consumers, that sustainability, being sustainable is costly. No, I don't buy into that argument at all. Being sustainable is about being more aware, being more conscious, and it should not cost as much. There are a number of sustainable companies around the world that we have seen who are doing wonderful business, and they are still continuing to do great business because they won't charge you more for that, because the technology, the supply chains, all those have become so very well integrated in the global scenario, in the globalized scenario, that we are not, in a way, that whole point that sustainability has to cost is gone out now. In a way, it's an old debate, and in today's market, I think that's not an excuse. I think companies must do it, and we also, like when I answered Hong Fei earlier, we must also take our own responsibility in this regard.
Mhm. And then we have a last comment or question from Yijing about other concepts. Is mentioning hedonic behaviorism and to promote such concepts, or are companies using different explanations when they talk about sustainability?
Yeah, why not? I still don't understand. In a way, some companies, you're absolutely right, Eugene, in your observation that a lot of companies are still using sustainable consumption through the lens of functionality. But I think, why not tell people in saying that sustainable consumption is more pleasurable? Pleasure and sustainability are not paradoxical. I think they can all go hand in hand. So possibly using that position, earlier there was a question by Chinmoy about what is a positioning. I think this hedonic sustainability could be a very interesting position for companies to take and differentiate themselves. And yes, why not? Why can't sustainable product be more pleasurable? Certainly they should, and they will.
Okay, great. We are perfect in timing. 2 more minutes to go. Thank you so much, Paura, for this really enriching, enthusiastic, passionate conversation and presentation today. Thank you so much for dedicating your time for us. So as I mentioned earlier, the conversation has been recorded and a link will be sent out to you. For any other questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook for your comments. And again, thank you very much for everyone who was interested in the topic today. Wishing you all a fantastic rest of the day. Bye-bye. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.